If you want to effectively administer a powerful generative AI like Microsoft Copilot, you can't just start with the AI itself. That's a mistake. You have to begin with the architecture that it inherits. See, the entire security and data grounding model for Copilot is built right on top of the existing M365 foundational objects. Think about it. If you have misconfigured user permissions, or poorly defined groups, or just sloppy SharePoint site access controls, well, that doesn't just create a headache for you. It actually creates direct pathways for data overexposure through Copilot. So our analysis has to start with a really granular look at these core objects and the licensing that controls what they can do. This isn't just some prerequisite, folks. This is the fundamental control plane for the entire AB-900 certification.
All right, first up, we're going to deconstruct the M365 environment into its most basic parts. Before we can even think about applying a security policy to a Copilot prompt, we have to understand the objects that prompt is going to touch. Here's a way to think about it. If a user asks Copilot to, say, summarize the latest project update, Copilot's ability to even find that information depends entirely on its understanding of that user object, their group memberships, and the permissions on the SharePoint site where that document lives. If there's a failure anywhere in that chain, the AI is useless. Or, even worse, it's insecure.
So what are these core objects we keep talking about? Well, they're basically the nouns in the M365 grammar. You've got the user object in Entra ID, the group object that bundles users together, the team in the Teams Admin Center, and of course the SharePoint site and library where all the content is actually stored. Now, the first big challenge for any administrator and a huge focus for the AB-900 exam is that there is no single dashboard to manage all of them. For instance, to set up a new project team, you might create the user accounts in the M365 Admin Center, then pop over to Entra to create a security group for access, then configure the team and its channel policies in the Teams Admin Center, and then you'd have to go set granular permissions on the SharePoint library that's connected to it. Mastering this distributed model, well, it's just not optional.
What's really fascinating about this Mac is how it shows you the history of the platform. The M365 Admin Center, that's your top-level control for identity and organization-wide settings, things like custom domain names and assigning licenses. But if you need to do something specific, like place a litigation hold on a user's mailbox, that's an email function, right? So you have to pivot to the Exchange Online Admin Center. Similarly, if a user can't get into a specific folder in a Teams Files tab, you're not going to the Teams Admin Center for that. You're going to the SharePoint Online Admin Center because SharePoint is what provides the back-end storage and the permissions for all those Teams files. And finally, for controlling who can present in a meeting or if transcription is on, that logic lives in the Teams Admin Center. You absolutely have to know this separation of duties.
And to expand on this even further, a user's license is basically the master key that unlocks everything. It's not just a single on or off switch. An M365 E3 or E5 license, for example, lights up a whole suite of different capabilities. The Copilot for Microsoft 365 license, that's an add-on. It can't be assigned in a vacuum. A user has to have a prerequisite base license first, like Business Standard, Business Premium, E3, or E5. This is a critical check for any admin. If you try to assign a Copilot license to a user who doesn't have that base license, it's just going to fail. This hierarchical licensing model is the absolute first gate in getting AI capabilities to your users, and it's your primary way to control both cost and features.
Okay, so we've defined our foundational objects and their licensing. Now we can get to the primary threat vector, a compromised identity. In a world where our data is spread all over the place and accessible from anywhere, that old castle and moat security model is completely obsolete. And that brings us to the most important security paradigm for a cloud-native world, zero trust. This isn't about adding more passwords. It's a fundamental mindset shift to assume breach, where a person's identity becomes the new security perimeter.
At the absolute heart of the entire zero trust model is this one non-negotiable principle: verify explicitly. This means we throw out that old idea of a trusted corporate network. We assume every single access request could be malicious until it's proven otherwise. And we're not just talking about a username and password. Verification uses every data point we have available. Who is this user? Is their sign-in location weird? Is the device they're using compliant and healthy? What application are they trying to get into? What's the real-time risk score for this specific sign-in attempt? We trust nothing implicitly, and we verify everything, every single time.
So the crucial question becomes, how do we turn this philosophy of verify explicitly into something concrete, automated, and enforceable? The answer is Microsoft Entra Conditional Access. This is the primary policy engine. Think of it like the bouncer at the front door of your M365 tenant. It is the technical implementation of zero trust. It's constantly looking at a set of incoming signals, the who, what, where, and when of an access request, and based on the rules you set up, it makes a split-second decision to grant access, block it, or challenge it for more proof.
And this policy logic is just incredibly powerful. Think of it as a dynamic if-then statement for your security. For example, if a user is a member of the finance leadership group and they're trying to access the corporate financials app, and they're signing in from a country they've never been to, and their device isn't marked as compliant, then we make the decision to block access completely. This real-time, multifaceted evaluation for every single sign-in is what makes your security posture so adaptive and so robust. But here's the thing. Conditional access doesn't work in a bubble. It's the engine, but it's part of a whole security suite in Microsoft Intra. Strong authentication methods, like FIDO2 keys, give conditional access a better, more secure signal to evaluate. Single sign-on makes sure all access attempts get funneled through conditional access for that evaluation, and critically, Privileged Identity Management, or PIM, gives people just-in-time access, meaning admin roles are only active when they're actually needed. That drastically reduces the amount of standing, privileged access an attacker could go after. And then you have tools like Identity Secure Score and the audit logs that give you that feedback loop to see how you're doing and investigate when things go wrong.
Okay, so we've locked down the identity plane with all the tools in Microsoft Entra. We've established strong controls over who can get in and under what conditions. But authentication is only half the battle, right? Now we have to shift our focus to the data plane, the information itself. And that's where we move from Entra to Microsoft Purview, which is the central hub for all your data governance, risk management, and compliance across the entire M365 world.
And this isn't just a random list of features. This is a layered defense for your data, which is so critical now with AI in the picture. Purview Information Protection lets you apply sensitivity labels that actually encrypt the data, so even if Copilot finds a document, only authorized users can open it. Data loss prevention can stop Copilot from summarizing a sensitive file and letting a user paste that summary into an email to someone outside the company. Insider risk management can flag if a user's prompts to Copilot start looking like they're gathering a bunch of data before they quit. And, most directly, that data security posture management capability is built specifically to show you how AI services like Copilot are interacting with your most sensitive data. Okay, here is a critical point, especially for the AB-900 exam. You have to be able to tell the difference between these two core Purview concepts. Sensitivity labels are all about protecting data in real time. When a user applies a highly confidential label to a doc, that label can enforce encryption and put a watermark on it. The protection travels with the file, so even if it gets emailed outside the company, it stays encrypted. Retention policies, on the other hand, are about the data's life cycle. A retention policy might say all financial contracts have to be kept for 7 years for legal reasons and then automatically deleted. So one is about preventing unauthorized access right now, the other is about managing the data over time.
And this is where it all comes together. We've built strong identity controls on the identity plane with Entra. We've built robust data governance on the data plane with Purview. Now, we get to see how these two foundational layers work together to manage and secure the incredible power of Microsoft Copilot.
If you take away only one thing about securing Copilot, let it be this. Copilot does not have its own identity or any special permissions. It operates strictly within the security boundary of the person who's logged in. When a user types a prompt, that query goes to the Microsoft Graph, which is basically a security-trimmed index of all your company's data. The graph first figures out everything that specific user has permission to see, their emails, chats, files, everything. Only then does it pull information from that pre-filtered set of data to ground the AI's response. If a user doesn't have access to a file, then as far as Copilot and the Graph are concerned, that file just doesn't exist, period.
And this table here illustrates that interaction perfectly. Let's walk through it. First row, the user has read-write access to a general document. No problem, Copilot can summarize it. Second row, the user has read-only access to a confidential file. They can see it, so Copilot can summarize its contents. But this third row, this is the critical security test case. The document is labeled highly confidential. More importantly, the user has no access in the SharePoint Access Control List, or ACL. So when Copilot asks the Graph for information, the Graph sees that user is not on the ACL for that merger document, and it will not return that document in the results. Copilot never even knows the file exists, so it's completely blocked. The underlying permission model is the absolute final word.
Now there's this specific line in the study guide that points us to a new and vital tool, Data Security Posture Management for AI, right inside Microsoft Purview. As Copilot use grows, admins need more than just audit logs, they need actual insights. DSPM is designed to answer those big governance questions, like, hey, show me all the prompts that have touched data labeled as highly confidential in the last week. Or, which users are hitting sensitive financial data the most through Copilot? Or maybe, are there any files with bad permissions that are getting overexposed through Copilot searches?
It gives you that AI-specific visibility you need to manage this new way of working.
All right, we've laid all the security and governance groundwork. Now we can finally pivot to the practical day-to-day work. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of what it actually means to be an administrator for Copilot and its more specialized cousins, custom agents.
Okay, something you absolutely have to nail down for the exam is the difference between the built-in Copilot and these custom agents. The Copilot you use in Teams to summarize a meeting, that's a general-purpose assistant for broad productivity. Agents, on the other hand, are specialists that you as an admin or developer build using Copilot Studio. They are designed with a specific trigger, a specific set of actions, and specific data sources to run a repeatable business process, like a chatbot for handling IT help desk tickets. So one is a generalist Swiss Army knife, the other is a custom-built precision scalpel.
The way you actually pay for these things is also really different. The standard Copilot for Microsoft 365 is a predictable per-user, per-month license, simple. But when you start building custom agents in Copilot Studio or using other AI services, you're going to run into a consumption-based pay-as-you-go model. You might pay based on the number of sessions your custom bot has, for example. As an administrator, you have to get good at managing both those predictable license costs and keeping a close eye on the variable consumption billing so you don't get any nasty surprises.
Your day-to-day as a Copilot admin really boils down to this core loop, and it's almost all managed right inside the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. The cycle starts when you assign Copilot licenses to your users. From there, it's a continuous loop of monitoring. You're tracking that pay-as-you-go spending, and you're analyzing user adoption with the Copilot Analytics dashboard. Then, based on what you see, you manage and refine the experience, maybe by turning off certain features or by providing better guidance on how to write effective prompts. It's just a constant cycle of assign, monitor, and manage.
For our last section, let's really zoom in on those custom agents. See, unlike the built-in Copilot, these are tools that you actually create. And because of that, they have a full life cycle that you as an administrator have to understand and manage, from the moment they're born to the moment they're retired.
This structured life cycle makes sure you're deploying custom AI in a governed, controlled way. It all starts with the creation of the agent in Copilot Studio. Then, and this is crucial, before it's deployed, an admin has to explicitly configure who can use it, usually by assigning it to specific Entra ID security groups. This stops unauthorized use right in its tracks. A lot of companies will then have a formal approval step to review the agent's function and security before it's released to everyone. And only after it passes all those gates does the agent go live, which is when the continuous cycle of monitoring its usage and performance really begins.
And here is another one of those critical, gotta know it for the exam details, knowing which admin center to use for monitoring your custom agents. For the high-level, business-focused stuff, you go to the M365 admin center. That answers questions like, is the sales team actually using the new agent? But for the deep, technical, operational insights, you have to go to the Power Platform admin center. That's where you find the nitty-gritty performance data, like session duration, error rates, and detailed analytics for troubleshooting. So think of it this way. M365 tells you if it's being used. Power Platform tells you how well it's actually working.
And this really is the ultimate question, isn't it? When you master these fundamentals, when you can truly secure identity, govern data, and manage the life cycle of these AI tools, your job completely changes. You stop being a reactive troubleshooter just fixing broken things. Instead, you become a proactive strategist. You become an enabler who can securely and effectively deploy the power of AI to drive real business value. And that, right there, is the ultimate goal of this certification, and really the future of the modern administrator.